So I'd like to welcome everyone to the March speaker series presented by Napa Solano Audubon. We really appreciate you attending and would love feedback. So if you want to give us feedback on how you enjoy them, please do. And it's open to the community. Next month, we alternate between Benicia Public Library, which is now letting us come and do it for free, and the gracious Napa Valley Lutheran Church that lets us come for a very nominal fee. And we have our own custodian that helps too, so they don't even know we're here. So thank you very much, David and Denise Hamilton, for opening up this facility for us. So first announcement, we have about 10 minutes of announcements, and then we'll turn it over to Charlie Toledo. The first is our newsletters are virtually at the printers right now. So you should be receiving a newsletter at least by Monday, okay? Or Tuesday at the very latest. If you want to choose the electronic version, I'm hoping you're gonna get that as soon as tomorrow. So if you wanna help us save paper and postage and all that, then tell us that you'll happy to receive only the electronic version. If you're relatively new members, you may only be getting the electronic version anyways, because we kind of shifted over to that as being the default. Next on our agenda is our t-shirts. We still have plenty of t-shirts in all sizes. They're a beautiful Kestrel t-shirt. And actually, let's see if I can do this. I might be able to do this. If I go to our screen here and go to our Audubon website, is that the right one? We'll see. No, it's the wrong one, but here's the link to the right one. There we go. So here's our new website, and I think I might have to share it in Zoom. Let's see if Zoom allows me to share it. Hang on one quick second. Go away. And here is this. We're going to go to the Zoom, and we're going to share this. Share. There we go. I did it. And here's our screen. But if you go to our website, right now under the sale button, which is hidden off screen because of this little thing right here. Whoops. Okay, I don't know what I'm doing half the time, so that's okay. So I'm gonna try it one more time. Share this. Come on. Where'd it go? Share this. Share. Oh boy. Yeah, thank you. Let's go to here. What happens if I hit, there you go. Yeah, there you can see it. So this is our new website. And if you haven't been, you should go regularly because some of the first things in the website are all of our upcoming events. You can see tonight's presentation here. We had a beginner's birdwalk last Sunday, which was postponed till this Sunday. So I need to change that date. We have a Pinnacles National Park field trip coming up, and we have a presentation next month by yours truly on birding in Florida, and that will be held at Benicia Public Library. And then we have a field trip to Yuba Pass and Sierra Valley that information has not yet gone out. We're debating whether it should be a 2 or 3 day trip. So go to our website. There's usually a bird of the week. This tufted duck turned up along Milton Road in the ponds out on Milton Road. And it put on quite a display. You can see the little tuft coming off the end. It looks a lot like a scaup or a ringneck duck, but it has beautiful black, jet black back and head and bright white flanks with sort of 2 little spurs on the flanks, and that's our bird of the week. If you click on it, you'll learn more than you probably ever wanted to know about tufted ducks. Next on our website is our scholarship program. We're encouraging everyone who knows seniors in high school or people graduating from a two-year college who are going to pursue careers in ornithology, wildlife, or related fields. We have a $2,000 scholarship that we give, one to Napa and one to Solano. So please, if you know any kids of that age, let them know about it. Applications close on April 30th. Again, we have a beginner's field trip, and we have weekly field trips led by Andrew Ford. He's a fantastic naturalist and knows not only birds, but plants and amphibians and reptiles. And almost every week he goes out when his work doesn't call him in for the weekend, usually on Saturdays, sometimes on Sundays. And he sends out his e-blasts the Thursday before the weekend, telling people where they're going to go. So you have to sign up for field trips, and the way you do that is you click on this little button way up here at the top of the screen called Activity Sign Up, and sign up for field trip notices. Hey, this is better than my notes. So we have the March large monthly field trip to Pinnacles National Park on March 24th and 25th. And we have the April field trip to the east side of Lake Berryessa, led by Larry Kent and Robin Leong, who are both wonderful birders. Larry's really exceptional and he actually found the tufted duck, so I believe. And then it talks about tonight's program. So we'll put next month's program up there, and then finally the May program. Let me see if there's anything else. Oh, one big thing about monthly field trips is that they're open to members first. And we really encourage you to become a member because they usually fill up the day we send up the sign-up form. So the last 2 months, they've filled up the same day. And so members were the only people who got to go. A couple people who signed up who weren't members suddenly joined, so they got to go. Yeah. Yeah. So the April trip is more local. It is. Please mute your computer, okay? So I don't have to mute you. Okay, I'm going to mute you. There we go. Mute. Did I mute? Mute. There we go. All right. So go back to sharing and this and share. Okay. Boy, it jumps out of sharing really fast. Is it on the bottom again?
It's back at Safari.
If I just click that? Oh, awesome. Okay, perfect. I need technical help usually. So anyways, the monthly trips fill up fast. We send out a Google registration form. All you have to do is write in your name and phone number. And now we're asking for emergency contact numbers too, just in case something happens on one of our trips, we can get a hold of somebody. And our June trip, as I mentioned, will be to Yuba Pass and the Sierra Valley. If you haven't ever been to the Northern Sierras, it's magnificent in June, and it's a great place to go. Okay, a couple last-minute announcements, and I'll turn it over first. Saturday, April 12th, it's only about a month away, is Earth Day. And Betty LaBastida is here in our audience, and she organizes our Napa Creek cleanup. And the cleanup begins at 9 o'clock and goes until 11 or 11:30 if you wish to work that long. And they clean up a section of Napa Creek, and the meeting place is right behind the former Firemen's Museum, right off from Main Street, and the other street is Pearl, Main and Pearl. You can bring your own gloves, or Betty will have gloves to share. You can wear grubby clothes and walk all the way down to the creek to clean up, or you can stay on the sidewalk if that's more your druthers. Then following the cleanup, there is an incredible open house at the Oxbow Commons Park with literally hundreds of vendors, organizations like Napa Solano Birds, and we will have our own table, so please come by and visit us. But there's food, there's activities, there's art, It's really a fun Earth Day celebration. Once again, that's Saturday, April 12th. I've mentioned our scholarship program, so send any of your scholarship hopefuls to our website and have them click. The application is online. And then maybe the most important announcement of the night is that your president, myself, has been on the board for the last 5 years, has served as president for the last 5 years. I'm looking for someone with lots of energy to come join me and do some of my duties or take over entirely. So get a hold of me. All the information is online on our website. If you'd like to become a board member and really step forth and volunteer a lot for this wonderful organization, we'd love to have you. Our elections are always at our May meeting, May 8th. So please let us know by the end of April if you're interested, and we will give you something to do. Then on Saturday, yeah, please mute your computer for me, would you? Then Cornell's Ornithology Lab, their global big day is Saturday, May the 10th. That's always a fun day to go out birding. If you use eBird and submit your checklist, they receive it. You don't have to go out all day. You can go out for 10 minutes. You can look at your feeder and submit your list, or you can go out all day. We had a group of young birders a couple years back who actually set the Napa County big day record with 170 species in one day. So you can do it in May, and it'll be lots of fun. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce our speaker for this evening. She is Mrs. Charlie Toledo. The program is all about how the significant role that birds have played in Native American cultures. Birds were used by every Native American tribe for food, medicine, art, and ceremony. Charlie will share her knowledge of birds and the role they played in California Native American cultures, and she will explore the reverent relationship that California Native American tribes had with our incredible feathered friends. Charlie is a Towa, I hope I pronounced that right, Towa descendant, native to New Mexico. She is currently executive director of the Suscol Intertribal Council, a community-based organization since 1992, located in Napa. She has extensive experience as public speaking, presenting in schools and in forums. Since 1982, she has also worked in alternative healthcare fields, as well as background in mediation for individuals, families, and organizations. She's also a very enthusiastic organic gardener since 1978. I want to try some food from her garden. It sounds like it'll be great. She has a lifelong commitment to social justice and international work on human rights and environmental social justice issues. With our new administration, there will be a lot for Charlie and her friends to work on. So without further ado, let me introduce Charlie Toledo. We're going to turn this around so Charlie can face you. And, I'm going to fix it for you, Charlie. Let's see what we're going to do.
Talk loud enough.
Yeah.
Usually if I'm in a bigger group and I'm hearing his voice get absorbed by the people here. So I am a descendant of the Towa tribe, but I've been living here in Napa since 1972. This week I'm really busy at the UN because President can zoom in. I don't have to be in New York City. So as part of a couple of international panels yesterday on climate change and today which does include, people think human rights involves torture, but it actually involves access to clean air, clean water, healthcare, education, safety, in your home, in your workplace, and in your streets. And it's a list of 13 things.
So you need to sit here, Charlie, so everyone online can hear you. Okay. And we now have almost 30 people online, so we're going neck and neck with attendance here.
Okay,
there's a sign-up sheet that's coming around. Please make sure you sign it up.
Can we make this fill up the screen, or is that as big as it's going to get?
I think that's as big as it's
Okay. So I know nothing about birds. That's my disclaimer right away. He said I'm going to tell you what I know about birds, nothing. But I know about the traditional uses of birds. So this is a presentation I put together for all you guys. And I hope and I want it to be a discussion rather than me just talking at you. If you have questions, just, raise your hand, or because it's kind of dark, I might not see your hand. Just yell it out loud. But this first picture, I realized I can look at this and not have to look back there. It shows the use of birds ceremonially. Now, the woman in the white feathers, those are goose feathers, that's traditional regalia. And then the middle picture is older art, but that's the Miwok people. And then to the far right, the woman in the green is a regalia, and those are Quetzalcoatl feathers. I'm forgetting the name. I'm going to forget the names of all the birds. But anyway, so if you have any comments or questions, and like we said, so this is an important thing I wanted to start with, is that the most notable law signed by President Carter was the American Indian Religious Freedom Act, and that was in 1978. Oh, can you move it so the screen?
Yeah, I'm going to try. That should do it. There you go.
Okay, there we go. 1978. So this was an act aimed to protect and preserve the inherent rights of American Indians, Amescos, Aleuts, and Native Hawaiians to practice their traditional religious freedom freely. And before this was put into law, Native Americans could be arrested or killed using their traditional lifestyles, having feathers, blah, blah, blah. I'll talk about that a little bit. So before this, the federal policies restricted indigenous religious practices, including access to sacred sites and the use of holy objects. President Carter emphasized that religious freedom is a fundamental right for every American and directed federal agencies to evaluate their policies and to be sure they didn't interfere with Native reverent practices. So that was 1978. As you know, laws don't happen immediately. So even, oops. How am I thought if I press this button, it moves it.
Which one are you pressing?
This one?
No, press the down arrow.
Oh, the down. Okay, sorry. I have a weird thing around computers. I also can make them not work.
Yeah. We're all in that
there we go.
category. So
There we
just
go.
press down on that.
Oh, press down on the thing. Okay. So given that, and I'll talk a little bit about that still, I'll refer back to that Religious Freedom Act, because then I want to focus a lot of my talk on Napa, where we live, and what we've gone through just here in this community. And so the hummingbird is an important bird for most of the traditional people through the Americas, and it's considered the messenger. So when you see a hummingbird, that's a good sign. A lot of people, when they have a loved one who's passed away or something, they say, a hummingbird came, and it just calmed me down. I felt like it was the spirit of that person communicating, which is exactly how Native people believe the hummingbird. And the hummingbird is the smallest of birds, and it exists on the nectar of flowers, but it travels further than any other bird, I guess maybe except the condor or something. But it will, the hummingbirds that we see here travel down to Mexico. Once I was down in Ecuador, and I was in a hotel, and I felt something watching me, and I looked out the window. There was a hummingbird outside the window looking at me, but it was a beautiful hummingbird with long tail feathers and the big wings. So those are the hummingbirds that travel from Mexico down to South America. But they go back and forth. So we think of now, and that's what we're doing here as an organization, helping to reweave Turtle Island. Native Americans referred to North America as Turtle Island. And when the Europeans invaded here in the 1400s, they had this idealized picture of from sea to shining sea, and they made these two parallel lines, which we now call the United States, but that really cut the belly out of the turtle. And certainly compromised the lives of the Native Americans that were living here for tens of thousands of years. Our histories go back 30,000 years in the Western Hemisphere, North and South America. My DNA to New Mexico is 35 generations, some of the oldest DNA on the continent. But going down into Central America and South America, those tribes weren't as disturbed as the tribes in what we call the United States. But the hummingbird is sacred to all of the people. It's more of a West Coast. I don't think it's in the central part of the country. But so I'd like to start with the hummingbird because that's just a precious bird that is really a bird of this time. It's a bird of transformation, and it exists on the nectar and the beauty of flowers. And with that innocence, it still travels further than any other bird. And these are some pictures I took just to show I do get out and look at birds once in a while. Now, this is all I know right here. I'm not going to go more than that. But this is a blue egret down in the Napa River. I love to go to the oxbow. And there's some ducks down there and reflection of the water. I've taken some incredible pictures, reflections on the river, but I especially love, and the egret feathers are feathers used and the duck feathers are used in regalia. One of the most important birds for the tribes in this region, the Pomos, is the turkey feather. And of course, this is a domestic turkey. And some people say the turkey wasn't a traditional bird, but whatever, it became the traditional bird for Pomo people. And that's what we'll start with this. The feathers are used by dancers. And then the turkey was a food, you know, because it's a big bird. And we just saw a turkey the other day going up to Pope Valley, and someone said, "Oh, it's a turkey." I said, "Yeah, they can't fly that high," because it didn't go on the road. Yeah. So talk louder. I know nothing about the birds.
They were native to America on the East Coast in the forests, but then they moved gradually west.
I think they may, yeah, that they may have come here by themselves, but they don't like to fly very high. And so usually you see them walking or they're kind of gliding. But again, as a food source, this would be a lot of food and a lot of feathers. So this is kind of showing the local feather dance, the flicker feather. So that orange band, these are art, this is drawings, but the orange is the flicker feather, and that's used for the face gear. But now because the flickers become so endangered, you'll see in some of the pictures, it's not the feather, but they're kind of orange popsicle sticks painted orange with a little black fringe. And that's also not to, a lot of times when the tribes go out into the public, out of their ceremonial grounds, they will wear different kinds of feathers than they do in high ceremony. But the turkey feather, you can see this is a cape. It's called a cape and a skirt, the feather dancers. And then the picture down at the very bottom is a traditional, it's a sepia picture, so it was post-colonial. And the elder there is wearing traditional face gear. And that's the tip end of the flicker feather is that black top. And then the rest of the feather stripped, so just the orange color. And when we're in ceremony, it's, you know, we're dancing on behalf of the people, we're talking directly to the creator, so we're anonymous. The dancers are anonymous because it's not about them, it's not about their ego or their personal, you know, whatever. And so that's that. But you don't really see too many of the capes like is wearing in this picture. And you see in that top picture with the face gear, he's got it wrapped around all the way around. And you would never see that out in public, probably. The cape, the skirt. What do we usually see as the skirt? And then this is a picture from Lake County. If this picture, I zoomed in closer so we could see the regalia, but that background, that beige background is Mount Konocti up at Clear Lake. And Clear Lake is one of the headwater places of the Napa River. And you can see this picture, they're wearing clothes, so it's post-colonial or what I call the post-Euro invasions. But you can still see the feathers on their regalia. They're wearing clothing, but you'll still see them in the feathers. And then behind in the background is the roundhouse. So the tribes in this region, which is kind of San Francisco, Oakland, all the way up as far as kind of when you start getting into Humboldt County, the tribes had roundhouses. They lived in tule houses, so the houses in the background are made of tule. And those were the houses where the smaller families would sleep, but in the winter, especially like now in the cold winter, the tribe or the clan might stay in the roundhouse, and that was their ceremonial gathering place, what we would call a church. But they were round because the belief is that evil lurks in the corner, so if you have a roundhouse, only goodness can come in. And so the winters would be spent storytelling, basket weaving, making regalia, and staying warm. And so this picture was a time when the roundhouses are still there. And the traditions didn't go away, they just had to go into hiding. Like I started this lecture that it was a felony offense, and then as late as the 1930s in this valley, they were still killing Indians. They would go hunting up in Pope Valley, and there's newspaper articles you can find about that. So 1978 was when it became legal again, or it was decriminalized, but it didn't really hit the streets until more like 1992, when we started doing ceremony here in Napa town.
I was still having to call the police department, the fire department, and I said, we're the only people on this earth that have to call the fire department, the police before we can pray. But when I'd called to let them know we were going to be doing ceremony at the confluence of Napa Creek and Napa River, which is the oldest continuously inhabited place in North America. Okay? We would have to call in. That's where I was living. That's where we were deciding to do ceremony. We decided to push the envelope. Okay, you say we can pray? We're going to pray here where we're living. And that started kind of a little mini revolution in the area. But sometimes I'd call in early because I didn't want to call at night when we were getting the fire started. And I went out to kind of work around the lodge, and a little helicopter would come and circle my backyard. We were being watched, followed. I can get a long story about that, but I'm going to talk about birds. Do you know where John the Baptist Church is?
Can you repeat questions about
Oh, okay, so she's saying, where does the Napa Creek meet the Napa River? It's at the confluence of Napa Creek and Napa River. You think of John the Baptist Church or the Oxbow that we just talked about, the fire department. That's Napa Creek right back there. And that's where it starts to meet the river, right there. So that little triangle of property behind what used to be Mervin's is now Cole's and soon to be something else. That's what the Catholics did and still do, is they go to places and kill the people that are living there, and then they put their church on top of the oldest sacred place. So John the Baptist Church is built on top of the oldest continuously inhabited place in North America on Napa Street. Napa Street, Seminary Street. Where I was living was Napa Street and Seminary Street. So we were right there at the creek with the creek around us. I don't know how to mute you, but mute yourself. But this picture again is another picture of a roundhouse. This is up probably in Calusa. Do you want to get in here? If this was my computer, I'd go and mute them.
Please mute yourselves.
Take your seat.
Come on, let's see. I gotta turn it on.
Yeah. So a lot of times we have somebody managing the thing, and a lot of times I'm doing it on my computer, but I know how to do it.
Okay,
I would
need
just
to-
go in there and
I
mute
need to get
everybody,
here.
but I don't know
Yeah,
how to
well,
do
no,
that.
I already did that, but that means someone came in.
Right, somebody popped in and didn't mute themselves.
Yep.
And
There
then
you
now
go.
we always get in the habit of saying, could you unmute yourself to talk? But keep yourself muted. Again, if you have any questions, go ahead and ask.
I don't think I can get this any.
This is a picture of a roundhouse, and you can see how this looks different. This is cedar, what is that called? Like when shingles, cedar shingles. So it's a little bit different. Some of the roundhouses have tule tops, some of them have redwood, but this looks like cedar shakes, and this is more like Calusa, the Central Valley. But you again see the dancers with their face gear, their skirts. A lot of times they'll have a leather skirt, and then the women are in cotton dresses. So again, it's post Euro invasions. But you see all of their headdresses are feathers, and those are turkey feathers. We're going to take some closer looks. And these are old pictures. So again, the tribes never stopped ceremony. They just stopped doing it in public. Uh-oh, I'm trying to move. I think this wasn't a place where it could move to the, that's the thing, if you move the cursor. So I think you move the cursor because now it's not working to move it.
Oh, okay. So did you do this?
I did.
You know why they call it the cursor?
Yeah.
Okay.
But if you have any comments or questions, just raise your hand or talk out because I'm kind of looking at the screen. I know when I do Zoom all the time, I used to try to zoom in close to stuff or put my cursor around to point out stuff, but then it's not at the place where you push the little arrow because usually it's down there at that corner.
Maybe.
But I can't see the
Oh, I
cursor.
see. It's in the edit mode right here.
Oh.
So maybe we want to do that. And then,
Oh, there we go. So this again is a picture that's been colorized, but you see closer up the regalia, and you see their skirts are not just turkey feathers, it's a combination of different birds, probably what they were able to find. And a lot of the regalia is handed down through generations. So it might be 3 or 4 generations old. You take care of the feathers, you keep them in a dry place, you do eventually, let them be out in the rain, but dry them off, and then that just takes care of them for a long time. And then the body paint is traditional. It would indicate the different tribes. And you see a combination of fur and then the different feathers, but the flicker feather bands, that's typical. They didn't color that. The stripes on their legs, those indicate different bands. So tribes are made up of bands, and bands are made up of clans. A tribe is a language group. A band is a large group of families, like extended family, aunts, uncles, and stuff like that. And then a clan is the immediate family group, brothers, sisters, mothers, grandparents, first cousins. And all of those groups have names for themselves. This is, again, a picture. You know, these people are very dark-skinned. It almost looks like a pose picture because I'm not sure if that's really people's hair. And once I was asked, how come, you know, your skin's not dark? But a lot of the traditional people, especially in this region, spent most of their time outside. So their skin was much darker. And the white, that's rabbit skin, so rabbit headgear. They're not, and then around their necks are the face gear. They're not in ceremony. They're obviously posing for the picture, so the headgear, the face gear's off. And then they've got their clamshell necklaces, one of which like I'm wearing. And that was the money or the exchange. And one reason the tribes used clamshells and had necklaces was that they didn't have pockets. So they carried their money. And it was usually the women that wore the money, the necklaces and stuff. But this is just a picture, again, that shows the flicker feather gear and the clamshell necklaces and then the rabbit skin head tops. This is a contemporary picture. This was in Oakland. This is when the tribes first started to come out. And actually here in Napa College, 1992, was the first time Suscol Intertribal brought California dancers. We had 3 California dancers. There were over 1,000 people and 13 dancers. But it was the first time the tribes from this region were going out in public since the genocides of the early mid-1700s. But now it's safe for the tribes to be out. You see these boys, and they're wearing kind of, some of them have the real feathers, but usually going out like this in a public setting, they have popsicle sticks that are painted, and then they're just a little tip of the feather, and that feather's usually a pigeon feather. The white feathers could be domestic geese or egrets or something like that, but you see them with their necklaces. Those necklaces are usually traditional or handed down from generations. They're made of shells and sedge, woven usually from the grandmother or the father. And then you see the hawk feathers in the back. Those are considered the horns because sometimes it's a deer. The different feathers indicate different things.
What are the white feathers on the
Oops.
one in the right? The white feathers?
I think those are goose or egret because they look the same. And so here we see the hawk feather, the red-tailed hawk, they're used traditionally for the headgear, the feather dance, the skirts, and the fans. And I'm going to go in. So these are the different feathers. You strip them out. Usually if you find a bird, and I used to find birds, you know, I used to sometimes people would say, oh, you know, could you find me a hawk? And I was like, oh, don't ask. Because then what happens if somebody asked me, then I was driving down to San Francisco on that, 116 or something. I just had like a sharp pain in my heart. And I thought, oh, am I nervous? I thought, I'm not nervous or anything. But I came around another curve on the road, and there was a hawk that had just been hit. So I pulled over. There was a pullover spot, and I got my docket and wrapped it up and brought it. It was still alive. I thought it was going to die in the car, but it didn't. And unfortunately, its spine was broken, but I did keep it with me for a day or two. And then I took it to the vets, which they said there was nothing they could do. So they had to put it down, but I would have maybe kept it. But anyway, that's how we find our feathers. Usually it's not hunting, but finding roadkill and stuff. And I always say to people, be careful what you ask for, because then that means somebody is going to offer their life for what you're praying for. And the person who had asked me for an hawk feather, I did find one later. I guess I saw another roadkill on Big Ranch Road. I saw the hawk get killed, and the feathers just fly all over the road. And I pulled off and was just crying. I had a bucket in my car, so I went and gathered all the feathers in the body, and the hawk was still alive for a minute, and somebody drove past me. A woman just had to go faster, and she hit the bird a second time to make sure it was dead, I guess. But it was just really heartbreaking. So I was crying the whole time. A few people pulled over. They didn't stop to bother me, but I just gathered all the feathers in the body, and I'd call my friend. I said, I got that hawk for you. I said, don't ever ask me for anything again. But because there's a price. We have to think about when we ask for things. But this is a close picture. These are contemporary pictures. These are ceremonies. Usually these are off what we call on the res. But I like this picture because it shows the woman's regalia. She's got the hawk feathers in her headgear. And then off, those are horns, they're called, to tap into the universal energy, bring it in. And sometimes there's feathers. I think she's got shells on them. And then you see the turkey skirts in the background, and they've got their face gear. And the picture to the left, again, those hat nets, those were made out of sedge and stuff traditionally, or hemp. And then they've got their clamshell necklaces. You see the armbands. Sometimes that would be painted on, but now they kind of do beadwork or just, and then they're wearing, you can't see it in the picture, but they're wearing those turkey feather skirts. The woman down at the bottom with the white feathers, and those are probably egret feathers. This is from one of our powwows. So that was at the Veterans Home. And the fact that she's wearing a dress, traditionally the people here would be wearing tule and nothing on the top, but they'd just be wearing tule skirts. And then for ceremony, because they only dress like this for ceremony. People think Indians run around with their feathers, but they're not. And so again, that's traditional. And even though her dress is cotton, that she made it, she's put her traditional family basket designs into the dress. And usually everybody, a family member makes the regalia. It's either the person themselves. And this is again, a recent picture of a gathering up north, and you see the turkey feather skirt. You can see the tail feathers on that one guy in the middle. He's got the back feathers, but down at the bottom are the fan. And then the other person, I think those are probably buzzard feathers. The black, yeah, the vulture. And you can see the different, if you look to their head, you'll see they're wearing different things. Sometimes that top knot in the back where the feathers go back, those might be pigeon feathers. And those are ways of communicating how the feathers look and how they're worn. That's actually communicating forms of nonverbal communication. And you see now that that's more, kind of Euro contact where they're wearing tights and stuff on their feet. Generally, their legs would have been painted or something like in those earlier pictures that I showed. And I know I talked fast, so again, if you have any comments or thoughts.
You can see that last man on the left had the popsicle sticks.
Right. That didn't used to happen, but now the flicker feathers are so rare that's what, and then there's more and more dancers. More and more people are going back to the dance.
Quick question, is Dee here? Dee from the press? Okay.
So April Jackson, she's Lake County Pomo, and she's usually our host. When we do our powwow here, we've done it for 29 years, although we don't have a venue, so it would have been our 30th year. But she's helped us for, I think, 15 years, because then she's a tribal, this is her territory, so in her territory, we ask the tribe permission, and she's the one representing, and we call her the hostess. But you can see her headgear, and again, she makes all her own regalia. A mature, traditionally raised woman like herself, the regalia would all be made by herself. And then she's making regalia for her children and her grandchildren, teaching them also how to do that. But you see she's got the turkey tail feathers. That face gear is rabbit. And sometimes it's dyed, it's white rabbit skin that they dye. And then those horns coming out have a little abalone shell. And those are, have a purpose, but she's got a beaded front. So her face is somewhat visible because that's what people just started doing. But she's wearing traditional abalone necklaces. Again, those were made by herself or her family. And then she's got her orange dress. The tribes in this region a lot of times use the color orange, and that's because of the flicker feather. That's the sacred bird of this region. So one of my nieces started, at one of our powwows, she had a dream of having an all orange dress, which nobody had done, and she did it, and it created a whole thing. And then we were over in Santa Rosa, and all these dancers from Lake County, and they were all wearing orange dresses. And she was only 15, and she got so mad. I said, no, it's fashion. It's replicated. We didn't know that many people would to our powwow, and they were watching, and now that's become a common. But she was the first person who came out with that, and I think it was probably about 15 years ago. But because they used to have a little bit of orange, and she said, I'm just going to go all orange. And now that is, and that's in honor of the flicker bird. It's a color that the pomos, again, this is her full dress, Lake County traditional pomo dancer with her turkey feather headdress, and then she's got a red hawk fan. Down in her hand, you see that red hawk, and the fan is, again, you use it. Sometimes you'll see the powwow dancers but it's part of it is to draw down the energy, to send up what's not. It's a form of prayer and ceremony. I won't explain all the detail of it. But this is up at Skyline Park. And what April did, she would make a dress for each powwow. She made a whole new regalia for each powwow as respect to us and to the tribes, the first people here.
So they look like red-tailed hawk feathers.
They are.
Okay,
Yeah, I think I said that.
Yeah.
It's a red-tailed hawk feather.
Oh,
So
it's
that,
writ- It's written there.
yeah. You got it. Holy moly. I think I might have said it too, but then that regalia, if you take care of this stuff, it can last for generations. And you take care of the feathers, we consider them like people. You make an offering, you pray for them, you wash them off, you rinse them in water, you let them have the sun, you know, and then you put them in a cool, dry place, and they can last for a long time.
Do ribbon colors mean anything?
I'm sorry?
Ribbon colors, do they mean anything?
They do mean things. I'm not going to explain everything to you. Were you going to ask something, Phil?
I'm just curious, to collect feathers and have feathers like that from wild birds, do you require a permit?
Theoretically, you're supposed to have a permit, but nobody questions the tribes anymore. Again, it was illegal, and a lot of people are still in prison from having eagle feathers and hawk feathers, Native American people. Not so much in California, but like in the Midwest, South Dakota, North Dakota, where they never stopped their religion. They didn't get as wiped out as the tribes in California did. So they were still, especially in the 70s when they started coming out, you know, that whole hippie movement was kind of focused on the Indians, but the Indians were coming out from where they were put to die, basically, on the reservations. And they were bringing their medicine, and they were getting arrested. It was a felony offense for every article that you had. I've never been asked for, you know, but theoretically you have to be a culture bearer, a designated culture bearer from your tribe. You have to have the paperwork that proves that, blah, blah, blah. But I know we were sometime, one of our powwows and one of our dancers that was actually, she lived here in Napa as long as I did, just recently moved away, but she's also from New Mexico, but lived here about the same time I did. And she would have eagle feathers and all this stuff when it was still kind of to bring it out in the early 90s and stuff. And I remember there was a forest ranger at the thing and he goes, well, she hopes she has a permit. And I said, I didn't say anything. I just looked at him and goes, I don't think anybody's going to ask her. You know, because she looked like she would just look at you and you'd die, which probably would have happened. So it is a dangerous question to ask. But this is one of our local guys. He was raised on the res and he still co-produces with me a lot of the work we do at Suscol. We did have an office for about 20 years, but unfortunately a few years ago we lost our operating budget funding and we had to close our office, and then COVID happened. But we were doing classes for about 15 years on Lincoln and wherever Lincoln, it's on Lincoln, I forget the cross street. So he was teaching, he wasn't teaching a class, he wanted to document this because Native Americans, the life expectancy for Native Americans in the United States right now is 52. He was 45. He wanted to make sure he document all the steps of regalia making for his children or his grandchildren. So we documented, but not for public use, but we did take these pictures and I show them. And we're documenting it, we're making a film and he's showing all the steps of making the regalia. And again, that stays in-house. I'll close that picture. I really thought for a while about doing it, but I thought, okay, I could do it. And these are hawk feathers, so red tail, and I forget what that other hawk is, the black and white. But they have the little stops, and he's just, you know, showing how to make it. And again, and this is something I want to share because people always think that all the tribes are the same, but there's over 574 different tribes. And our organization is intertribal, but we don't represent a tribe. We just do advocacy work locally, statewide, and internationally for Indigenous human rights for Native people. But the eagle feather wasn't used by the tribes in this region. California people didn't use the eagle feather. Those were more the out-of-state Indians. And that's why I wanted to make clear because people think, oh, the eagle. And I was like, well, the eagle is like over there, not here so much. Like the feathers I just showed are from this region, the tribes in this region. And then you cross the borders into Nevada or going especially through the Lakota region. They used eagle feathers, okay? They were out-of-state Indians. That's what people call me. But there are bald eagles around here. They're not used, the feathers aren't used for regalia in these local tribes. And those are the ones you get more in trouble for as far as crossing state lines and stuff like that. You have to have the paperwork.
A lot of people don't realize we have quite a few pairs of nesting bald eagles in Napa County right now. There's at least 2 pairs down by the water treatment plant in the Carneros region, and there's at least one or two pairs up at Tennessee and at
Right.
RDS as well.
And I've seen the ones up at Lake Hennessy. I would hear about them, but then I finally saw them, which is fun. But they're here. They just weren't used ceremonial. Again, the turkey's easier to get because it's so low to the ground. But this is one of our powwows this was at the Veterans Home. Unfortunately, we weren't able to keep going there because of whatever the stuff that happened up there. But I'm showing the woman in the yellow is April Jackson that we talked about later. You can see that in every picture she's wearing a different dress, but you see her turkey feather headgear. And then next to her are some of the gourd dancers with the ribbon clothes. But the people under the tree, you see the bustle that Percy Edwards is wearing. Those are eagle feathers. He's a Nez Pierce from Washington, and they use the eagle. So again, the tradition is that you gather your own medicine. You're not purchasing it, although that's kind of gotten loose, and a lot of times you can buy feathers, but you see the intertribal, the different outfits, the different tribal areas. You see the April in the background of the one picture where there's a cluster of people with their headgear and then her different dresses. But I like this picture just because it shows the different bustles, the eagle feather. And this again is Percy Edwards. We call him our poster child. He's Nez Pierce. He makes all his own regalia because people think that the women do it, but generally it's the men that do it. And the men oftentimes make their women's regalia. And so this is again showing all the different feathers. So this is all very traditional. It's leather, it's feather, it's a sheep head or a goat. I forget what those horns are. I think, what would that be? I'm not thinking an ox, but it's not because it's white. So I don't think it's a buffalo. I think it's a horned, some kind of sheep. Yeah, like a goat or sheep. Yeah, yeah. And then all his spears, everything is traditionally made. He makes everything. He got so famous he left California, which was sad for us, but he moved down to Sedona in his retirement. But they're all handmade by him, and he has 32 outfits. He probably has more. I used to tell his wife, aren't you glad he has this hobby? Because you can imagine if he didn't have it, what would he be doing?
Is the chest protector he has, what are those?
Those are bone, and a lot of times that could be the leg bone of the eagle. And a lot of times that's a whistle, but that could be also the bone of a buzzard. There's different bones, and that's more, that gear is again more the Midwest or like the Lakota region. But he has turquoise and leather, so everything he collects, he makes. And then on the back, what he's wearing is that huge bustle that we saw. I think I might have thrown in one of those pictures. So here he is with his headgear. I liked this picture again because it really captures the eagle feather, and you can see how they're all individually wrapped to be sort of that mohawk. But he's got a mountain lion, skin of a mountain lion on his face, and then hanging down those could be like rabbit skins, or again it looks like it might be buffalo, because the Nez Pierce do have they're in the region of the buffalo. And then the painting he did, because he was one of the friendliest powwow dancers, because a lot of times they used to be kind of stuck up. And I remember he came to one of our powwows and I was standing behind him to go in, and I said, how do you paint your face? And he got into really careful detail about how he did that. And that was unusual. So he became our head man dancer for about 10 years till he left the area. Just a really, really nice guy. And then what he was also was the CFO for the Indian Health Services, about 22 Indian Health Services in California. So he was a mathematical accountant type person. And that's why I used to joke about it. It's a good thing he's got this other hobby too, because he was detailed, but very, very friendly, very, very open. Spent a lot of time. It's another picture of him. And then you get the eagle feather bustle, and off the top would be, I don't know what that is. I was trying to think. Sometimes it's a feather and sometimes it's a string. It's a different thing. But his fan is the tip wing of an eagle feather. And then the face, that head stuff, I was trying to think of what it is. I think it's porcupine quill. But again, the leather on his wrists and stuff. And then you see the bone on the bone bracelets. That's again the leg bone of the eagle or some other bird. And the cape that he's wearing. And this is a close-up of that same outfit. I think those are eagle feathers, probably the little feather under the wing. And then I believe those I forget what they're called. I was trying to remember the name of it, but they're porcupine quills. And that's part of the headgear from, again, the out-of-state tribes. They're not California. Now we're looking at the different tribes. And then the way that a person might paint their face, that's just the artistic creativity. He just happens to be an amazingly creative person. Because most people have like one or two outfits. Like I said, you got 32, so I'm just showing this little fashion show here. And then I love this picture because it's intertribal. Remember I said tribes are made up of clans and clans are made up of bands. So these guys are all the same tribe because they have the same regalia, but you can see the bustles with eagle feathers, that those are all made differently. And then their headgear is a little different. So it's probably, they're different bands. And then you see the one guy with the headgear is all feathers. And a lot of times, some of the California dancers, the Paiute and stuff, which Paiutes in California and Nevada, but a lot of times they just have that whole headgear of feathers. And they're doing like a competition. And I just threw in these guys because but this is because the wild birds are too rare and stuff, and then powwows and coming out in public is more and more popular. So then the tribal people went to domestic birds. And the rooster, of course, is a great, the tail feathers you'll see in some of the regalia coming up, and some of the face gear. And then the black and white feather in the middle, that's kind of a feather that's kind of like the turkey feather, but the rooster feathers are used by the people from like Mexico and Central America, but the tribes here too, because the wild birds are harder to find. And so it's domestic birds. And so this is the intertribal regalias from 2011. But you can see here, these are the kind of the chicken feathers, but maybe they've been dyed. Okay, and then that's where you have a whole lot of them. And the dancing stick that the person has, those are feathers. The headgear, those are domestic feathers, and then porcupine quill. Okay, any comments, questions? And then I just threw this in because we've just done a mural, and I wanted to show how now we can come out of hiding and stuff. So our property up in Pope Valley, because that's one of the things our organization did, and that's why we formed in 1992, was to create a land base that would be safe for Native Americans to do ceremony. Because on the reservations, most of the tribes got Christianized, or else they died or were killed. And so that's still kind of a conflict within the Native community. So we created the land base, and we had to kind of be hiding there, but we feel safe enough now. The Suscol house that we just finished, we finished the outside, we're still working on the inside. But this mural was something, we designed a wall with no windows, and that's facing Childs Pope Valley Road. And we just came up, it was a collective group of people. The guy painting right there, Paul Stone, he's a direct descendant of Towa. Towa was the Paiute medicine person who started the ghost dance. If any of you know about that, the ghost dance was started during the European invasions when the tribes were being wiped out. And then how I learned about it in schools, or you heard about it, was, they thought if they danced, they would make them bulletproof. But that was that predator mentality. That wasn't what was happening at all. It was a ceremony, deep ceremony, that the people would survive the incredible genocides and the mass murders that were occurring here. And it was started here in California, and then it swept it spread all over the United States, and made the United States government really scared. So a lot of times when people were gathering for the ghost dance, one of the largest massacres that happened in South Dakota was that, a gathering for the ghost dance. And the military just came in and shot all the women and children and men that were dancing. And then I used to see that. They thought it'd make it bulletproof, but see, it didn't work. But then now we say it did work because we're still here. And Paul Stone is a descendant of that medicine person, Paiute person. So he's an artist that I've met and been around for 20 years. And I always said, if we get the mural together, which that happened this last season. And so we had a group of people, California tribes, and then him as the lead artist, and they came up with a collective design, and we decided to dedicate it. It's dedicated to the survivors of the bloody runs out of Napa Valley that ran on Childs Pope Valley Road. That was the road they were running on to get away from the massacres and the disease that was here and up into Lake County.
When was that ghost dance massacre? What, 1800s?
Yeah, it was the 1800s. You can look it up, and that was in South Dakota, Wounded Knee, that area. And then you see again in this picture, I put that because we started with the hummingbird, so we're kind of wrapping up again. The hummingbird is one of the messenger birds, and when we were coming up with a design, because there was the lead artist and then 4 intern artists who were going to learn about mural and how to make a living, because Paul Stone has been a professional artist for 32 years. So he was mentoring other Native people how to make a living and be a professional doing art, so it was kind of a year-long program. We kind of met about 6 times. The mural, we didn't know how long it was going to take, but it took, I think they actually only spent 5 days, which we were all impressed. We thought it would go slower, but we just projected it. But the first thing that somebody said, we said, let's start throwing out ideas. And we were Zooming our meetings. And someone said the hummingbird. And because I'm the facilitator, I try to allow things to happen and not be the boss of everything, which, is hard. But so somebody else threw up the hummingbird, but I was like, that's a good idea. And then it's really predominant on and again, because the hummingbird represents the healing of Turtle Island, like traveling back and forth, doing cultural exchanges like we've been doing for about 20 years with Mexico and Central America, reweaving Turtle Island, healing from the wounds of the European, and the hummingbird represents that for us. And then there's the California Pomo dance. Now you're all familiar with the face gear, the flicker feather. A lot of times they're dancing with feather and they have clapper sticks, and then those are hawk feathers off the top. They could call them the horns. And it's kind of a folk art picture. And so this is a variety of feather baskets for ceremonial use. And I hope you can see that. Yeah, it's good. See, I'm looking here and I'm real close to it, but you can see it good. So duck feathers are woven. These are traditional baskets. And that's why we always like to show the baskets, because the excuses made for the massacre and the genocides that occurred here, especially horribly in California, was that we were savages and that we were just wandering around in camps. We were just camping for 10,000 years. We lived in permanent villages, civilized people. This work is not a work of savages. These baskets are represented, they're storytelling, they're gifts, important gifts. The smaller the basket is, it's actually harder to make a tiny basket than a big basket. But this art form is being recovered in California. The California Basket Weavers Association restarted in 1992. And I know the first time I would go to those gatherings, there'd be like 20 people weaving. And now there's like hundreds of people and all ages. And so the skills being brought back and people are remembering. This one woman shared a story. She fell asleep under a willow tree, and then she woke up. When she was waking up, she heard her grandmother's voice, who had died before she was born. She said, this is your medicine. You know how to do this. And she just harvested the willow and made a basket. It was in her DNA to remember that, thousands and thousands of years of memory. So these feather baskets, so those are duck feathers, those bright colors around there, woven into the basket. And the feather baskets that are made now, because that art form, I don't know anybody really that's doing it, but I know there's people trying, that a lot of times they'll take the bird and skin it, and then just take the skin and kind of stitch it on, not weave feather by feather into the basket. But you can see how incredibly, yes?
What's the significance of a feather basket versus a woven basket?
Well, a feather basket is way harder to make. So it's much more precious, and it would be a gift usually given for a wedding or the birth of a new child. And then again, all these things would be passed down generationally. In the traditional days, a lot of times when the basket weaver died or the person who had the baskets, they would burn the baskets when the person died. But then some of the elders that I fortunately had the good fortune to know in this area, they realized that things were changing. And so some of the elder basket weavers from this region said, don't burn my baskets when I die. And those are the baskets that are used that a lot of times this one woman, I was watching her teach, because I was at a lot of the basket weaving things, but just again on Zoom and watching how people are doing up in Lake County and Redwood Valley, just north of here. And this one woman, she was the one who had the dream under the willow. And then she had a bunch of baskets laid out on a table, and she had all these young people come, and she said, you pick which basket you want to weave and then weave it. And that was her instruction. And she said, let the basket tell you how to do it. So again, that's that DNA memory when you remove the trauma of all the crap that happened. So even you see that little reddish one right there in the middle, that would be really hard to make, weaving those tiny little feathers. Imagine weaving feather by feather into the willow. So these are made of willow. And the willow's stripped. They all have to be the same length, the same width. And then the black is the sedge. And you take the bark of the sedge, and then you hike it through your teeth, and then that's the color. But the one at the very top, up there, that far left, right corner, whatever it is, you see that little tip? That's the quail the top knot of the quail. And you see that in a lot of the work. Isn't this, you can just kind of stare at this all day, couldn't you? It's just so beautiful. But I found the picture of the duck. I'm like, okay. And so this is an incredible basket. This is a traditional wedding basket. So this shows the little white things, those are clamshells. So when they're really tiny like that, they're incredibly valuable because it's so hard to make them because it's so easy to break them. But you see this incredible weave, the baskets, the pomo baskets are some of the best baskets in the world. A lot of them are watertight, and this looks like a watertight one. But you see the little black stuff off, those are the actual top knot of the quail. And then in the triangle piece, you see that little flick at the top of the little triangle pattern. That's also representing the top knot of the quail. And the quail would be for feathers, but then also quail would be food. But it was a really important bird because it was good food. And I had a friend who was a hunter, and one time we saw a quail, and he goes, that looks like lunch. I said, don't say that. Stop it. And he goes, it's just like a little, I need 2 of them. And I was like, stop it. But anyway, and then the little white are clamshells. And then you can see this basket, how thin the willow is. So you imagine you're harvesting the willow. It has to be the same length, the same diameter. You have to let it be, and then you peel it all, and then you peel it through your teeth. So that's what takes me into the UN, into the world community, trying to, and that's what we're working at the state level. It's been for 25 years now, getting them to raise the standards, them being the state water board, raise the standards for what's toxic water, because they're not thinking that people are putting that stuff in their mouth. And so that's something we're still working on, but after 20 years, it's starting to change. And it's been a lot of work. But this is the beauty, again, showing that we were civilized people living in permanent villages. Here in this community, there's archaeological proof of 10,000 years, but our oral traditions say 30,000 years. And we didn't come from China or Russia. The people were here. That's one of the things in my world travels, and I've traveled all over the world. I would always ask traditional people when I'm sitting in, where do you come from? That's a question I always ask. Because one time I was talking to some young people, and they said, how do you know all this stuff? I said, well, I always admit that I know nothing. But going into other communities, I would always ask, where do you come from? And they'd always point. So the tribes from this region come from Mount Konocti. They come from under the mountain. Even when I was in Hawaii, I asked at the big island, I was sitting with some of the tribes over there, and I said, where do you guys come from here? Did you come from across the ocean? And they said the same thing. Oh, no, we were always here. We came from, and then she described exactly this one big tunnel that was there. I said, and she said, no, literally, because I'd always say, was that literal? And they'd say, yeah, we really came from under there. Because our stories tell us there was a time that we couldn't stay on the surface of the earth, so the two-leggeds had to go underground. And so all the different places, I've traveled in Afghanistan, Ecuador, Mexico, asking the people, where'd you come from? They'll point to a mountain, a cave, and they say, from there. And that's literal. It's literal, it's not a metaphor. And this is this is like one of the most famous basket pictures because it's just so beautiful. But this is the woodpecker, and you see the white shells, again, the money shells, flat like that, that are woven into the basket, and these feathers are woven, it's the red-headed woodpecker, and then I think somebody said there was duck feathers. I was arguing with Sal about that, if they were duck feathers. I thought it was the black feather, the woodpecker, but he said that's green, and that's why I'm looking at it closer. It doesn't look green to me, but whatever. They're feathers, and they're woven individually into the basket, and then you can see the top knot of the quail. I mean, just amazingly beautiful, right?
When was these last 2 baskets you showed? Are they old?
Yeah,
I mean,
they're old.
is anybody making anything like that?
No. Not yet. I was going to take, we went to Uganda. I was just on Zoom today with my friends because we were in New York. I was zoomed into New York City, so we had a dialogue. And my friend from Uganda was going to come to California, but I won't get into the hassles with the flights and stuff. But we went to Uganda. We were going to take a group of pomos to Uganda because when we were there, East Africa, 2001, they had these incredible baskets, double weave, the lid's so tight you could hold the lid and the basket would hold watertight. They had the same patterns as the Pomo baskets. And they had, what did they have? Because in Swahili, it was one of the weird things that's happened to me when I travel. Sometimes I can just understand what people are saying, but I can't understand the language. I can't talk back in their language, but I understand. But so Swahili, if they don't have a word, they just make it up, like say your boot, food bootsie. There wasn't a word for shoe, so they just said food bootsie, boot, and they just add an SI or a GI. So the word for like white people in Pomo is masan. And then I was hearing over there in Kampala, they're saying masangi. And I said, masangi, huh? And it's the same word with a GI. Same basket patterns. Yes.
Language, that was the question I wanted to ask you, because I have heard and read that a lot of the native indigenous languages in the United States are very similar to Napa, to the Aztec, like dialects of Napa.
Yeah, the Nahua, yeah. That's another place that we've gone a lot.
So they've done the language studies, and so it's all kind of the same people that kept moving over thousands of years.
Walking, yeah, and sailing. You know, the thing about Columbus discovering America, you can't discover something that's not lost. That's what we say. But also that people were doing world trade. There were people from here traveling to Africa. They were from California to the West Coast, people traveling to Hawaii, to Japan, to China, and Chinese people coming here and trading. And they came in rafts, not in sailboats. So yeah, there's that. Anyway, if we could just look at this picture for a long time. I could always look at it. I was like, oh, it's so pretty. And then we go into the Mixteca dancers. A lot of people here from Mexico. And I just wanted to put this in here to show, like, again, the contemporary. Pheasant was the word I was trying to remember. Sometimes my brain goes too many places and I can't bring it to where I'm supposed to be. So that initial picture I showed, I put her face in, was the pheasant feathers. And one of my friends was so funny because he said, where are those Mixteca getting those pheasant feathers? I've never seen a pheasant with feathers that long. He said, they have their own breeding farms. And then I asked them and they said, yeah, they did. But again, the regalia is all made usually by the dancer. And these feathers are taken out. You can see the face, the plate, and then they're stuck in just like the other eagle feathers we saw. They're put in to make the bustle, and the bustle can be taken apart feather by feather, stored in a long tube. And so then when they're traveling with that, then they carry it in a tube. But when you're down in Mexico, you don't see dancers with quail feathers like this. But up here, they've somehow got them. And this was the Napa. Can you see the hills right there? Where John F. Kennedy Park. So that was the Mixteca New Year. And again, these regalia would be passed from family to family. You take care of the feathers. Because the feathers, how we think the feather is the wing. They go to the sky. Through the feather, we talk to the creator. We communicate to the universe. That's where the significance, the feather connects the two-leggeds who are earthbound to the sky and to the creator. And that's pretty much of the Americas, both the Americas. And this is just, again, showing the beauty. And again, the woman here, she was Napa. She was born in Napa. I guess she recently moved away, but you can see her. She's got macaw feathers. She's got pheasant feathers. And then the leather face gear and stuff. She made all that. Her outfit is all leather that she made. Her necklace or her earrings are feathers. The woman with the orange, just incredible macaw feathers. Again, those are very... I don't know what to say. I wouldn't say expensive because you can't buy them, but they're very precious. And then to have a whole regalia like that is very, very precious. And then you see the guy down at the bottom. He's got like a skull on there. He's one of the elders, but you can see how his feathers are smaller. And that's more like normal. I don't know where they get these long feathers, but they trade for them and travel for them. But I just to kind of show the different, all the different tribes. There's not one tribe. You can't make a generalization. I think there was over 700 tribes in the United States before the European invasions. And then if we add Canada and Mexico, it would be thousands of different tribes with their own languages, because each tribe means a separate language, and then the regalia and how they dance. But these two women are from Napa. They grew up in Napa. The guy at the bottom, he's an elder, and they live down in San Jose. And right now we're in the time of the Mixteca New Year, so the huge celebration. They're not at Kennedy Park anymore. I guess it was just too much work, but there's a big one down in San Jose this weekend. And the Mixteca dancers from all over the continent come, and we're all dancing for 2 or 3 days. And this is just another close-up of that same. You see those, I think those are either parrot feathers, the blue feathers, but you can see how the creativity, the incredible creativity involved, and how these become precious heirlooms. Again, they're invaluable. You can't put a price on them. And that's a whole thing to take care of them, to transport, going to Alcatraz. A lot of people go, the Mixteca dancers go. And sometimes they put the regalia on to be on the boat, but a lot of times they're there, and then they assemble the regalia and put it on. So I think that's my bringing us to the end. Oh, that did.
You mentioned Alcatraz, can you tell me a little bit more about
I could go back. So Alcatraz happened in 1972, and that's a long story, but that was when part of the prophecies of this time, is that the people would come and everything was going to change, and then there would come a time when there would be a light, a torch that would go up that the whole world would see. And in 1970s, the United States government was still transporting people from the East Coast, from New Mexico, Arizona, South Dakota, bringing them into the Bay Area and training them. And in the 50s, they were actually giving them life skills. They were teaching them skills. In the 70s, they were still doing that, but what they were doing was taking young people off the reservations, which was really remote, other world, bringing these young kids here, dumping them. Their job training was a referral to the unemployment office and a week at the motel. And then their families back home didn't have phones or money to give them a bus ticket home. And so some of the young people, the Oakland Friendship House, they were seeing these young kids that were dying within 2 to 3 weeks of getting here, getting hit by cars because they weren't used to traffic, or just getting really drunk and just really not knowing what to do, and being hungry and cold. And so they started the Oakland Friendship House, so they started being at the bus station. One of my friends, that was her job. She spent the night at the bus station. That was part of her job when she was going to UC Berkeley getting her training. And they would just see kids get off the bus, and they'd bring them to the Friendship House and help them decide, did they want to stay here, did they want to get training, or did they need to go back home, and they'd get them the tickets to go back home, a bus ticket home. But then the FBI was really harassing Native people back in the early 70s, and so at one point they blew up the Oakland Friendship House, which is what the FBI was doing, firebombing Native people and people that were trying to organize around things. So that was the motivation at that time. There's an Indian law, Indian Kapler's law, that any landless tribe can reclaim unused federal land. Alcatraz was unused federal land. So they started saying, let's take back the rock. That was a comment, let's try to let the world know and the country know what the US government is still doing to Indian people. We're talking 1970 now. We're talking San Francisco. And so when their Friendship House got blown up, that was the motivation to go. And then the feds told them, any boats that take you out there, the boats will be confiscated. So they were going to do a ceremonial circle of taking back the rock. And this one guy, and I'm always so bad with names, I'm sorry for that, but they realized they were going where the tide was just going towards the island. This one guy just thought, it's now or never. He jumped off the boat and let the current take him to the island. No planning, except the ideal that we could take back the rock. And then 22 men and women jumped off the boat, in clothes, nothing, let the current take them to the island. And that's how the island got taken over. And the people knew, they were all college, they were going to UC Berkeley. For some reason, the women, the Native American women were all at UC Berkeley, the guys were all at San Francisco State. So this one guy, he was the one that was one of the organizers for that. And they don't know why, but it was probably because the women could get into the university at better grades. Let's just put it that way. And so one of my friends, Luana Quidquit, she was part of that. She was a Lake County person, and there had to be California Indians, because we were in California, they had to be part of that movement. But when they took over the island, they had their laws they knew, and then they were able to hold it for 18 months. which sent like a rocket ship to the world that the tribes had survived the genocides of the 1400s and the 1800s. And that was just like the prophecy. And so then like a wave, it swept back. And every leader of this time, this last 20 years in the Native community, was on Alcatraz. It was like a training ground and a political training, awakening, get your skills. And they, after Alcatraz, a lot of them went and they got their degrees. Like my friend had her 2 kids. She left them on Alcatraz. She'd get a hitchhike on a boat to get into Berkeley, do her classes, go down to the bay, and any boat carrying them could be confiscated for transporting them back and forth. Jim Big Bear King, who lived here in Napa and actually lived really close to where we are here, Pine Street, he was one of the guys who was taking a canoe because they shut off the water and the power. So then there were tribal people who were taking at night, who were paddling canoes out to Alcatraz to take food and water in the night, a canoe. So that went on for 18 months. And think about that, you know, it was pretty amazing and phenomenal. And so what's happening now is one of the women who was out there at that time. So after that ended and they knew they weren't going to have it, they went to 2 other land bases. One was DQ, 600 acres west of Davis, which is still in possession, and Yakima, north of Santa Rosa. Those were 2 unused federal land bases that then are still in possession of tribal access or whatever. And so I was at DQ and helped that get secure. But it was like Russell Means actually he lived in Vallejo and worked at Mare Island. Jim Big Bear King worked at Mare Island. He lived here in Napa on Pine Street. He was born here. He was here during when the Europeans invaded. As a 7-year-old child, all the Indians that survived the genocides, they were rounded up and taken to Sonoma Mission and then also to Sutter Fort in Sacramento, where his family was taken. But once it was okay for the Indians to get off the reservation, then his family came back to Napa. And this is where he had his children, raised his children, his grandchildren, everything. And so he was one of my mentors. He started the first Suscol Indian Council in 1972. And then there was a 10-year hiatus and we reorganized in 1992. So he mentored me for about 15 years, how to deal with the FBI, how to deal with police harassment, how to deal with phone taps, how to deal with helicopters following you around, how to deal with the police going after your teenage children, putting guns to their heads, following them around, harassing them all the time. He mentored me through all of that. And I'm talking Napa 10 years ago. We're not talking ancient history. When we first purchased the land up in Pope Valley, we had to deal with a lot of stuff. But fortunately, that's mostly, I hope, is past. But that's why I started filing shadow reports to the UN about the human rights violations in Napa County for the indigenous people here in this area. And that's a lot of people working really hard. All the leaders, John Trudell, Russell Means, Dennis Banks, who's the guy that just got Leonard Peltier, Jim Big Bear, Norman Knight, all those people were on Alcatraz. And that's where they got their training, along with their degrees. They all ended up getting their degrees from San Francisco State and Berkeley while they were occupying the island, getting back and forth every day on boats, bringing in food. It was very, very organized. So that design that they came up with, the idea was that it would be given back to the tribes of all nations and it'd be a learning center for the tribes of California, of the United States, of the world. That's starting to happen. Lenata Warjak, sorry, I knew her name would come to me. Lenata Warjak is from Bangkok, wherever that is, Washington, one of the north. But she was one of the point women at Alcatraz. If you look at those old pictures, there's always this one woman. I always thought, who's that woman in these pictures? And it took me a long time to find out. But she retired from her teaching job and has written a book. And since she retired, she's been coming into Alcatraz, to San Francisco frequently. And the plan that they came up with back in 1972, they made a whole model and did this whole thing. That's going to happen. It's in motion. The land is going to be given back to the tribes of all nations. And it's taken 50 years. But, you know, if you're focused, and I always say you have to focus on the solution. That's why I love working with the UN, because you identify the problem and then you work on solutions. Oh, that didn't work? What would work? What do you think would work? Well, and then I could go on and on about that. But anyway, so that's the presentation.
Let's give Charlie a really nice hand. Why don't you go on
So do you want me to move, or do you want to have a Q&A? I didn't know if you guys want to
No,
ask.
I just want to make a quick announcement before the Q&A. And Mark reminded me when he talked about the bald eagles that are seen around in the different locations. The Napa County is currently in the process of updating their baseline data report. That means they are looking for all the locations of the 85 special status plants and birds and animals. And there's a list of 85 of them. And the reason I'm bringing this up is all of you are out there in walking and you know where these locations are. If you could please track these on eBird and on iNaturalist so that we can access them. But we're trying to get the accurate status of where these animals and birds are located. So when you brought that up and you were talking, that's what came to mind. So now you can do
So
questions and
this is
answers.
Yvonne Baginski.
No,
our
I know her.
Conservation.
I've known Yvonne for a
director.
long
John,
time.
where do we get the list of the 85?
If you want a list of the 85 special status, I have them. You can go, you can contact me, Yvonne Baginski at Gmail, and I'll send you the list.
Great. Thanks.
Oh, because I have to stay in front of the computer to,
Any quick questions for?
Any questions
Charlie
are-
Before we sum up the meeting?
thank you.
I'd like to know what challenges you see in the next few years with the Native Americans.
So the question is, what are the challenges for the next few years for Native Americans? She just, it's still a challenging time because you traumatize the people so intensely that embeds in the DNA. So there's a lot of violence within the community. But yeah, we're in better shape than we've been since the Europeans invaded here. The land back is happening. People said that would never happen in California. The land that we got, we purchased it. And we didn't put it into the BLM. It belongs to the organization. But now there is a lot of land back happening. And I think just being able to get along with each other and then just maximizing, which the tribes are doing. I mean, like New Mexico, the tribes weren't as decimated. So have been in pretty good shape compared to California. But California now, there's terminated tribes, exterminated tribes, unrecognized tribes, landless tribes. But Scotts Valley Suscol was a village site. When the Southern Crossing Road was built, that was the village site was being dug up, and that's where the organization got named after them. The survivors of Suscol Village ran up into Lake County, and they're part of the Scotts Valley Band, POMO, in Lake County. And if you're reading their newspapers, they just purchased land in Vallejo, those big bare hills right by Highway 80, and they broke ground this last weekend to build a casino, and that will be the land base. They've been a landless tribe, but now they've got their land base. And I think just to move forward and get along with everybody.
There might be a couple questions in the chat.
Yeah,
Let me
I
just
was
see
gonna-
really
yeah,
quickly.
Yes.
Why were the FBI, and you said as recent as 10 years, why did they target this group here?
Us?
Yeah.
Because we were coming out. We came out of hiding. Because, I was assimilated, I was forcibly assimilated. My grandparents were taken as babies from their biological families and then raised as servants in the Mexican households or Spanish households. So I was on the board of DQ at that time, and I already reorganized Suscol. And one of my friends on that board, he was California Pit River, and I was saying something at one of the meetings. He goes, "Charlie, can I ask you a personal question?" I'm like, "Sure." There's 17 other Indians around the table, all of them were California, so I'm considered out of state, which isn't like a nice thing to say. Kind of, it's usually said in an unfriendly way. But I said, "Sure." And he goes, "Do you have a lot of police contact?" And so this is probably 1994. And I didn't say anything for a while because I realized everybody in the room went quiet and they started looking at me. 17 elder Indians looking at you. It's pretty intense pressure. And I just took a deep breath and I said, "Actually, I do have a lot of police contact. Why do you ask?" And he goes, "Well, if we were doing any of the stuff that you're talking about, we'd be dead by now." They were still killing Indians here. Native Americans have a life expectancy of 52. That means 4 of my 5 brothers did not reach the age of 50. My grandmothers all died in the early 40s. The highest rate of young aged, 16 to 23, what are called transitional aged youth, young males, they have the highest suicide rate in the world, Native Americans, because it's so oppressive. Because, and then I always ask the question, how come you don't know this stuff, that I just shared with you? How come you don't know these things? And it's because the government, and then I've been going into high schools, which we tried to get into for 40 years, but now we're there. And then the high school students will say, well, what they did was really mean, and they don't want people to know that. And so when I came here as an assimilated person, so I had a college education, I thought, you want to argue with me? You want to call the police on my kids? You're going to be talking to me. I have to tell you, the chief of police did retire early, spend time with his family. But that's because I was already connected with the UN. I was already connected with Barbara Boxer's office. So when the police were harassing me and my children, I went to my representative and said, we are being harassed. I am a single mom with 2 children, living in an urban setting, being harassed by the police. They're going after my kids. And I said that in a public setting in San Francisco. And, guys meet at the golf course, women meet in the bathroom. So Barbara's executive director was in the bathroom. She goes, who was that person? What town do you live in? I said, Napa. Napa City. What was the name? The chief of police. I gave her the name, and I got to tell you, within 2 months he retired. So they just don't. It doesn't fit into the tourism thing. We discovered this beautiful land. It was just wild, and the people just moved north because they were just camping. And so then if we come out and start saying, no, we're still here. No, they don't want that story out. And that's what my friend had asked me when he was asking me that question, and said they would be dead already. And the elders around the table were like, yeah, how do you get away with that shit? I said, when they come up on me, I just go right back up on them, And that was, again, Jim Big Bear helped me do that. He mentored me a lot, and a lot of times he stood behind me, and he was 6'4", so. And he used to tell the police, because he used to tell me when he started organizing in the early 70s here in Napa, we're talking Napa, he said, if somebody wasn't threatening to kill me at least 3 times a week, I wasn't working hard enough. And I would just hear that. One time I was having a really hard time because stuff wasn't going well. And I was in the office and I was just crying because it was a hard time. And then we have a picture up on the wall in our office, or we used to have it, with a history of the tribe. It was a poster board, and then his picture. And then he just kind of looked at me and goes, I still got your back, Charlie. That I really felt that I wasn't alone, that we have our ancestors. And when you have that spiritual base for what you're doing, whatever your spiritual belief is, that gives you the resiliency to deal with whatever it is you have to deal with. Yeah.
So Charlie, I moved to Napa in 1990. You were already an icon. You were already an icon in Napa County.
Well, it'll just have to be somebody stupid enough, just like you said, the chair. I have trained people. I was at a gathering up in Humboldt County, and it was a women's gathering, a beautiful, up at Trinidad, the beautiful coastal casino hotel. And it was all these different women, Native American women, that had been the leaders, and they were 9 people on each panel. I thought, there's no way we're going to get through this, but we did. And then they were all older, and then it's like, well, who is going to come up? But the stories we heard, and then we just have faith. Like Jim Big Bear, who was going to replace him? He started having health issues because of his work at Mare Island, and then he stopped. And then 10 years later, I come along, and we had the same exact goals. So we don't know who's going to carry on. That's not my job. I've mentored a ton of people. But, my own children, at one point, they just thought this is a little too much, because especially, I won't get into the stories because they're pretty bad. But they said, we can't do this anymore, we just can't. It was really the mascot issue at Napa High School that was the most dangerous thing that we had to deal with. I would always get death threats every time it happened. When we had the public hearings, there were people that I didn't know. That was like a riot. And if you go to our YouTube channel, we have videos of the mascot wars, is what I call them. That was 3 years ago.
So someone online asked if you've seen the mural on Rabbit Hill, Toledo. Apparently there must be a new mural.
I think on the water tanks, I have seen that. And I saw that, again, on Facebook and all that, that comes up. I was just up in Lake County and I saw it. And then we're doing that with our little water tanks too. We have stencils with basket designs on them. But they're not like way up on the hill where everybody can see it in town. But you can see it on Childs Hope Valley Road. Phil saw it. He said, oh, it's beautiful. But we still have to fix the inside of the house. So we're always looking for support from people. And like, I guess, what did that just come up about who's going to carry on? I just think you have that trust. But I have mentored hundreds of people. I just got a call today, just before I came here, and that's why I forgot to bring newsletters, because I was going to bring newsletters and hand out to you guys. But we have a website too, so if you go Suscol Council, and then our newsletters are on the website. And I was going to bring some to hand out, and because I was in a phone call, I got distracted, and I realized that when I was sitting there and you were talking about your newsletter, I was like, oh yeah. But our newsletters are on the website also. But one of my young friends that I mentored and helped us build our straw bale houses and stuff, and I thought he was the first person I was meeting who really understood what we were doing with the land and stuff. And that's become a global model of what we've done out there. Because it's recovering water, soil, and forest management using fires, gabions, all the traditional land practices are there. And that's it's a living prototype that we, share with people. And again, because we can do it through our website and our YouTube channel, it can go global.
Well, let's give Charlie a round.
Thank you, all those guys out there.
And I'd like to thank all of you online viewers for staying with us and enjoying the talk. Once again, our next meeting will be April the 10th, I believe, at Benicia Public Library. So don't miss that one. It's going to be great. I have incredible pictures of Florida birds. So we'll see you in a month. Take care. In Benicia.